Russ Center for Media in downtown Cape Girardeau. Welcome to Focus on Southeast, a program on issues, events, and people impacting Southeast Missouri State University. I'm Dan Woods with KRCU Public Radio. On today's show, we will be talking about a book that discusses the end of religion, a documentary film on William Faulkner, and we'll learn more about AI and ChatGPT. Dr. Eric Bain-Selbo is Dean of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. He's here with me now. Good to see you again.
I'm glad to be back. Thank you.
So we're going to talk about your book, The End of Religion.
Yep, The Ends of Religion.
The Ends of Religion. So
yes.
How did the book come about?
Well, the book is really a culmination of probably a couple decades of work. I've had other publications beforehand and during that period, but a lot of my work was in the area of religion and popular culture. And one of the things I really focused on was religion and sport. And right. So I've published a lot in that area. And this book was an effort to sort of expand out, and I've looked at other things. I have a chapter in a book where I focus on religious violence in Quentin Tarantino movies. So I have branched out outside of the sports arena. And but with my background in comparative religion, I was really interested in the way in which the study of religion has led scholars in the field to get to a point where institutional religion just isn't as significant an object of study as it was in the past. So in the past, scholars of religion typically, and lots of people are studying Buddhism and Hinduism and Christianity, et cetera, right? But it used to be that religious scholars kind of studied almost exclusively institutional religion. Today, a lot of religious studies scholars are studying things in popular culture and the way in which those things in popular culture function religiously for individuals who are participating in those things.
Okay. And one of the things you note is there's ample evidence that institutional religion is in trouble. What
Yes.
do you mean by that?
Well, and in the Western world, the United States remains one of the most religious countries, in terms of church attendance, number of believers, percentage of believers in the population, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Our European counterparts, for example, religion is much less significant part of their culture and their societies today. And Pew, for example, Pew Research has done annual surveying of the American population, and church attendance is down in the United States, and it has been tracking downwards for generations. Mm-hmm. And so part of what I'm looking at in the book is, and this is the sort of play on words with ends with the S,
yes,
right?
You're right. Okay.
So what religious studies scholars have done is to be able to identify the way in which religion functions for human beings to serve certain needs that we have, right? And so that history of the study of religion has prepared us to start to look at other cultural phenomena and the way in which those cultural phenomena achieve the same ends that institutional religion has. And so what I'm interested in this book, and sort of just in general, okay. Is when people stop turning to institutional religion to fulfill those needs that they have, mm-hmm. where do they go to fill those needs? And the argument in the book is that they do that a lot in popular culture.
With sports, I guess would be one.
Sports, films, music. So these are the areas in which, and sport really is the area that I know best. Yeah. But you think about two functions of, I'll just give two examples, okay. Right? So when you look at the sociology of religion, religion functions to help create communities. And that's part of the role religion has played for millennia, right? It is what defines a community. It gives a community identity. It literally defines that community. And so when institutional religion isn't functioning that way for many Americans, where do they find that, right? And so for a lot of people, they find it in sports, right? They are a particular fan of a particular team. My work is focused on college football in the South. That is a classic example, I would argue, of a popular culture phenomenon creating communities.
So they built, it's another community that's replacing maybe what religion used to
Yes.
do for them.
Yes. And when I've done research in this area, it's always interesting because when I talk to people, particularly college football fans, right, about this, many of them, I often get two very opposite reactions. One is, oh yeah, of course, this is my religion, right? Like they're absolutely agree, like
Right.
no problem with that. And then others are, and they tend to be the folks who are still very much bound to an institutional religion, and faith is a very big part of their lives. To a certain extent, they're offended, right? They're like, hey, I may be a fan of the Auburn Tigers, but that's different than religion, right? And so some of it is, and I don't usually have a chance to have a lengthy conversation with people about this, but part of it is just going through that process of explaining to them, well, what is religion really, right? And so the other example is when you think about the psychology of religion, religions function to create those opportunities where we can have ecstatic experiences. So these are experiences where you sort of lose your self-identity, you feel part of a crowd, for example, of a group. Right. You're not self-conscious. You're just connected with everything and everybody around you.
And you're in the moment.
You're in the moment, right.
Right, okay.
There are a lot of people who will describe their experience in a major sporting venue in very similar terms. So then the question is, are they just using religious language because that's the only thing they have available to them to describe that experience? Or are they in fact having an experience that is very akin to a religious experience?
So if, let's say this plays out, church attendance I think peaked in the 60s. Does that sound right? Something like that, maybe? So it's been on the decline, and Pew's, cited that. If this continues this trend and religion becomes less of a force in at least American society, and things like sports and other things start to take over, what will that mean for society as a whole? What is there a dramatic change, shift?
No, I'm kind of unafraid of that future.
Okay.
I mean, a lot of people will, and there's a chapter in the book that deals with religion and ethics, for example, right? So a lot of people are concerned that once you take religion out of a culture or a society, right, that the foundation of ethical norms goes away, right? But I think we can look at our European counterparts, right, and I don't think the British are less moral than we are, or the French, or the Germans, right? I mean, and so I think there's a question about whether or not cultural phenomena are going to be able to have the power to maintain collective identity. I think that's a tougher one. I think cultural phenomena will continue to provide moments for ecstatic experiences. I think we'll just find those wherever we can, right? But and certainly institutional religions have always been businesses as well. I mean, there's a financial dimension to those.
Right.
And I think in the postscript to the book, I do think about the relationship of culture and consumerism, and to what extent a kind of market-driven consumerism can have a negative impact on our cultural phenomena, right? So, when sports become seen by their fans as merely businesses, as corrupted by money, I think fans will have a similar experience to the way they've responded to, scandals in churches, right? Right. So I do have a concern about the economic, potentially the economic corruption of our cultural phenomena, and I think we need to take our cultural phenomena much more seriously as a consequence.
Interesting. So The Ends of Religion, it's available on Amazon, I think, right? For folks that want to read. Dr. Bain-Selbo, good to talk with you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
When we come back, we'll be joined by Tyson Koenig from Kent Library to talk about an upcoming documentary on William Faulkner. You're watching Focus on Southeast. We'll be right back.
You're not going to get it all right. Just make sure you nail the big stuff. Like making sure your kids are in the right seat for their age and size. Get it right at nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
Welcome back to Focus on Southeast. Kent Library will host a film screening of Faulkner, The Past is Never Dead, in November on the SEMO campus. The 2023 documentary is the first ever about William Faulkner, created with the authorization and cooperation of his estate, and offers insights into Faulkner's life, struggles, and literary works. Tyson Koenig is Special Collections and Archives Librarian at Kent Library. He's here now with all the details. Hey, Tyson.
Hey, Dan. Happy to be here.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
I think your third time on our show.
Yeah, we were talking about that.
Good
Third
to have
time
you.
I've been here.
Good to have you back. So tell us about this documentary that's going to be shown on the campus.
Yeah, so as you just said, this is the first ever documentary about William Faulkner that's been made with the authorization of his literary estate, with their cooperation. I believe it was actually sort of their idea to start with, to do a documentary about Faulkner to sort of introduce him, or to keep Faulkner relevant in a new era. As a lot of people know, in Kent Library, Southeast has one of the 4 big collections of William Faulkner materials in the world that exists. So we were contacted by the documentary filmmakers about 5 years ago about this project they were doing, and they wanted to come and use the collection. So in 2018, 2 of the filmmakers spent several weeks here at Kent Library using materials from the collections. They got footage in our rare book room, and they did interviews with Dr. Bob Hamblin, who was the founding director of the Center for Faulkner Studies, and Dr. Chris Rieger, who was at that time the director of the Center for Faulkner Studies. And then subsequently they used lots of materials from our Faulkner collection. We went back and forth with them for the film. And so this is finally the culmination of it, that we are really excited to be able to do a showing of it here on campus in November. As you said, the film was just released earlier this year. It had its premiere in Oxford, Mississippi. Faulkner's where Faulkner lived most of his life. In March of this year, and it's just been shown at film festivals and private screenings, or special screenings. It hasn't been released broadly anywhere else.
So very limited at this point.
Yes, very limited at this point. So we're really excited that we get to host one of the screenings.
Why has it taken until now for this to be done? Has the estate always been sort of hesitant to do something like this?
I mean, you'd have to ask them about that, but I think certainly there never has been. There have been a couple documentaries about Faulkner done. There was a big one in the 70s that was done on PBS, but that was all just independently done and not with the estate. My understanding from what I've learned from what the filmmakers have said is that the estate really wanted to introduce Faulkner to a new generation and to younger people, and that was some of the impetus. Was they said a documentary is a good way to do that.
Yeah. Let's talk a little more about the collection there. You mentioned it's one of the 4 largest in the world, but tell us some of the things that are in this collection that the university has.
So our Faulkner collection is pretty unique. The most unique thing about it is that it was basically all collected by one collector, Louis Daniel Brodsky, who was from St. Louis and just was a lifelong lover of the life and work of William Faulkner. He collected this massive collection of William Faulkner materials. So there are lots of first editions of Faulkner books, there are signed editions of Faulkner books, and those are the things that are worth a lot of money. However, there's also a lot of research material. There are manuscripts, writings from Faulkner, letters. There's I think close to 1,000 or over 1,000 photographs of Faulkner, his family and friends. We also have the research papers of Joseph Blattner, who was Faulkner's first major biographer. So it's all of his research notes and everything that didn't make it in for the first big biography of Faulkner, which was published in the 1970s. So we draw scholars from all over the world.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. So how often do people come to look at the collection? Do folks writing papers and doing research?
Yeah, we get fairly regular requests to use it. Fewer people actually physically come here than people who we work with remotely over email and phone. We have a handful of people who actually physically come in a year, but quite a few more who we work with who say, hey, do you have any information on this topic with Faulkner or on this topic? Almost all scholars. Right now, I think we're talking to a researcher in Massachusetts and then various people in the South. And I've worked with researchers from the UK, Austria, Australia, and then Japan, Taiwan, and China. There's huge research interest in Faulkner in East Asia and has been for a long time. So yeah, we work with all kinds of people.
So I guess you coordinate that and find whatever information they need.
Yeah, so they contact us and say, I'm interested in this, and we use the tools we have about the collection to see what's there and go back and forth with them. Of course, it's best when people can come in person, but they don't always.
So let's talk back to the screening. So it's going to be shown in November, and there's going to be a panel discussion, I think, after. You're going to be on that panel, right?
Yeah, so the film is being shown on November 14th in Rose Theater in the Grau Building, and it's being shown at 7 o'clock. The documentary itself is about 90 minutes long, and so then after that there'll be about a half-hour panel discussion with two of the filmmakers, hopefully are going to be here for that, and myself and Dr. Bob Hamblin, who is the founding director of the Center for Faulkner Studies and literally one of the top experts in the U.S. on William Faulkner. I have not seen the documentary, but my understanding is that his interviews are featured pretty extensively.
I was going to ask you if you'd seen it. I'm sure Bob is very excited about this.
He is, and he was at the premiere in Oxford in March, so he has seen it. But nobody else on campus affiliated with the university has, so we're really excited to see it and see what it's like.
And this is all part of Library Week in November. That's when this is going to happen. Tell us a little bit about that. What's going to be going on?
Yeah, so this is the week in November that's been designated as Library Week as part of the university's 150th anniversary celebrations. So actually on that same day that the film is being shown beforehand, in the afternoon from 2 to 4, we're doing an open house in the Rare Book Room for university students, faculty, staff, whoever wants to come by to see the room. And then following that from 5 to 6:30, we're doing an event for alumni to come and visit the Rare Book Room. And next week there's actually being an invitation sent out for that where folks can register. That'll be an event you have to register for in advance because of sort of the limitations of space. And there'll be food with that, but that's open to alumni. We did an event like that about 5 years ago, and it went over really well, so we're doing it again. That's all on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, there's going to be some events for students. It's the 80th anniversary of the naming of Kent Library, so we're doing some birthday events in Kent Library. And on Thursday, there's going to be a lecture about the architectural history of the campus by Dr. Steve Hoffman from the Department of History and Anthropology.
A lot of exciting things.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you for being here, Tyson. Good to see you again.
Yeah, very happy to be here.
Okay, when we come back, we'll learn more about AI and ChatGPT with Bob Lowe. You're watching Focus on Southeast. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back.
It's time we take a step forward, come together,
and discover
how accepting our differences can make us stronger.
Welcome back to Focus on Southeast. AI, or artificial intelligence, becomes more and more sophisticated all the time and continues to work its way into daily life. ChatGPT launched in November 2022 and has caused us to look at what technology can do in new ways. Bob Lowe is Assistant Professor of Computer Science. He's here now to help us understand AI and ChatGPT. Hey, Bob.
Hi.
So this is very interesting stuff. I'm going to start at the baseline. Tell us about artificial intelligence and what is ChatGPT, for those who have heard that term.
Okay, so ChatGPT, the GPT stands for it's Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Okay. So it's basically this large collection of parameters that are fed into this sort of transforming numeric equation. So you can imagine every word being assigned a number.
Okay.
And then if you give it a prompt, that generates a sequence of numbers, and you plug it into ChatGPT's formula, and it just simply computes the next possible word. And it just keeps doing that over and over again. But it has 175 billion parameters in it, and so that's where the complexity comes from. That's what makes it as unpredictable as it is.
And there was wasn't there a 1, a 2, a 3, and now there's a, we're on the fourth?
We're on the fourth one. The fourth one is the 175 billion one, yeah. It just keeps getting larger and larger.
And it pulls it pulls information, I guess, from the internet and from things that are there on websites and papers and.
So the way it's trained, you just take a big corpus of text and then you feed it through that formula. So you get, okay, let me back up a second.
All right.
Imagine a sliding window.
Okay.
So you're going to look at so many words at a time. And then you'll look at what the next word is, and that tells you what the next word should be.
Okay.
And then you work out the equation backwards to figure out what the numbers that would make that happen would look like. Now, ChatGPT does that with a window that's 20,000 words long. So it has 20,000 words, it computes the 20,001st word, and then it just keeps doing that to train itself. So it's like a statistical model of all the text that's been fed into it.
So in the academic world, this can be used to help, write papers or at least develop outlines for?
It can write papers. It can write papers. It can write research papers. It can summarize things. It can write computer code. It can solve math proofs. It can do pretty much what you would expect a human to do with some degree of accuracy.
But if there's data that it's pulling from that's not correct or something, it's flawed, it pulls that in too, right?
Right.
So how do they circumvent that, or how do you fix that if it's doing things that?
Well, that's the big question, really, and so that's something that they're working on. But you have the same problem with humans, right? Because we'll make mistakes when we're doing this too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I can give you an example of a fun ChatGPT mistake that it used to make but no longer does.
Okay.
And so I once asked it if it takes 50 musicians 50 minutes to play Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, how many musicians do you need in order to play his Fourth Symphony in 30 minutes?
Okay.
And it worked it out as a proportion problem, and it came up with 15 musicians. Well, 14.9, but it said you have to round it up because you can't have a fractional musician. But now it says you can't do that. It knows that music has a fixed length.
So it's learned that.
Yes.
So is it always learning and getting better? With each iteration, 4 and then it'll be 5 eventually?
So it's learning between those, but not while you're talking to it.
Okay.
So that's where the pre-trained element comes in.
Okay.
The model's pretty much fixed when you're having a session with it.
So this AI, this is sort of in a lot of different things that we may not think about, like Microsoft Outlook. When you respond to an email and those little suggested responses,
that is generative AI that's forming that. And I've always joked that I've been using that to answer student emails, because they'll say, can I have an extension on an assignment? And sometimes it'll only give me the option of yes, absolutely, or no problem, or it'll say no. And I was like, I could let Outlook decide. And I don't know what its basis for the decision is. But
yeah, so it's in all of our stuff now. So the latest version of iOS for Apple, for iPhone, has a way to, if you talk into it for 15 minutes, it learns your voice, and then that's all the same kind of thing, right? Sort of?
Yeah, that's more of a traditional neural network kind of training. So it's learning the patterns of your voice, and it's building a model where it can compute how likely the speaker is to be you.
Isn't that something? So what is this going to mean for academics, for workforce? If AI, it could do a lot of different tasks that people do now that eventually it might be able to do itself, right?
Right.
So what's that going to look like?
So I think going forward we'll have to learn how to use it, especially in higher education. We'll have to be able to use it ourselves and teach others how to leverage the tool, because if you can't, then you'll be at the mercy of those who can, because it is going to be present. The other thing is it's not as trivial as simply giving it a problem and then just trusting the answer that comes back from it. You still have to edit what it says, and you still have to make sure you're giving it the right prompts to get the information that you want. So it's going to be another skill to learn, just like anything else.
Could this type of technology end up, writing newspaper articles, writing news stories, as long as it has the data available to it?
Yes.
Could it do things like that?
Yeah. I'll give you an example of something that I've tried with it. I've tried giving it poorly worded paragraphs and say, make this sound more professional.
Okay.
And then it comes back with a professional article with the information that I gave to it. So it can be very good at refining text that you give to the model. I've also used it to write humorous things for my students.
Okay.
Like there's this text editor that gets used a lot in Unix programming called Vi, which is really hard to learn, but it's really fast once you do learn it. And so I told it to write a tutorial for Vi in the style of the King James Bible. And then it came back with, "Be ye not as the heathen who knoweth not how to use the great editor." And then it just went on like that. And it was really wonderful.
So you can do a lot of different things with it.
Yes.
The provost was here on the show not too long ago, and we were talking about this just a little bit. And he said, if nothing else, ChatGPT is good at, for the academic side of things, creating an outline or creating something to sort of start with. If you're not really sure how to start doing your research or doing your writing, it can help you get started, if nothing else.
Absolutely. It's very good at outlines. It's very good at lesson planning. So if you tell it the objectives you'd like to have for a lesson, it'll come up with a series of activities that would help promote that. And another thing that it's very good at, like I said before, is summarizing text. So I wrote a paper over the summer where I gave it the paper and I said, write the abstract for this. And then it asked me, how many words would you like? And I said 300 words, and it wrote a very nice abstract that was exactly 300 words long.
What are some of the potential abuses of this? I mean, this is powerful technology that's only going to get better, right? What are some things that could be used to it that we may not really be happy about?
Well, one, like you asked at the beginning, writing entire papers, you could feed a book into ChatGPT and then ask it questions about that book if you have it in some kind of a text format. And so if you give a student an assignment to write an essay on some novel, you can give the novel to ChatGPT and tell it to write the essay, and it will do a fair job of it. And so there's potential for abuse there.
Mm-hmm. When you say give the novel to Chat, how does it get information? How do you get stuff into it?
So if you're using just the default one, that would be taking a text file with the document in it and copying and pasting it as a prompt. There are tools out there like there's one called PDF.ai that you can take a document and then you can set up the document to be another agent that you can chat with. So it's like you're having a conversation with the book, and then you can ask it to write things about itself.
And you're talking to the program, really.
Yeah.
This is just, it's amazing stuff. We're out of time, of course, but this has been fascinating, Bob. Thanks so much for being here and sharing this information with us.
Thank you for having me.
Focus on Southeast is a collaboration of KRCU Public Radio and the Department of Mass Media here at Southeast Missouri State University. Just a reminder that portions of these conversations will be broadcast on KRCU Public Radio and will be available online at krcu.org and on the station's YouTube channel. From the Russ Center for Media, I'm Dan Woods. Thanks for watching. Be sure to tune in next time when we focus on Southeast.